Well, I just started the part 2 of this disconnect. I've started disconnecting the batteries. I've already taken the waste tank out. What the heck was that? Took the waste tank out, set it there. So let's go ahead and keep going. All right, got to get these. I took the manifolds off of this engine, but the new engine, when it comes in, these supports for the seats are going to be in the way. So I got to remove them to prepare the way for the new engine. Okay, that task is done. Those support bars are removed from hanging over. This engine now is clear to come up. I may take those doors off because that thing is going to always swing in the way. Yeah, let me go ahead and take them doors off. All right, there were a few more things. This bracket for the throttle goes here. The spring connected to the throttle right here, make it come back and forth. Also, this wire I didn't connect the last time, so gotta disconnect these wires. I'm doing this also to help me remember. Goes into the wiring harness. Don't know where those go, but I think that has to do with the shift interrupt. Again, this is my video diary for how I did this. These two wires here, one of them is the oil pressure sensor. Comes back here and connects to that oil pressure sensor. The other one goes to the temperature sensor right here. So go ahead and pull those out. Okay, down in the back you have ground wires connected on either side of the block. I've already pulled mine off, but every one that came off I put through a zip tie so I know to put them all back on. They go into the stud in the bell housing here. And on this side is another ground wire. It goes into the bell housing, but this ground wire, at least on my boat, comes up to the distributor. And I'm putting a new wire harness on with the new engine, so I don't need to disconnect that ground. Next thing to do, get the engine mounting bolts. That one and that one. Remove both of those, or well, I'm gonna loosen them now so I can transport the boat to the shop, but loosen those two. All right, I loosened up those two rear mains engine mounting bolts. I was getting ready to disconnect the starter, and while I'm there, I was gonna disconnect the power steering hoses. But those power steering hoses, once you disconnect them, they leak like a son of a gun until every drop is out of the reservoir. So I'm gonna come try to drain this reservoir with a turkey baster. So put all that old fluid into a bottle and then disconnect it. It still is gonna leak, but at least it won't leak so much. All right, that's gonna be good enough for me. I got a good bit of it out, you know, a little cheap turkey baster. So now we'll disconnect the starter, wiring, and the power steering hoses back there. Those two hoses against the bulkhead. Not bulkhead, what is that called at the back? Whatever, y'all know what it's called. And the starter. And once you get down here, make sure you have your tie wrap to keep all those wires, you know, so put the tie wrap through all these wires so when you put it back together, all the same wires go in the same connection. And bring all the tools you need, because you see my legs are laid over there. I'm tucked in, because once you get in here, you don't want to have to get back out. And I have to get back out because I have to find a wrench that's gonna loosen that nut on the engine mount. All right, but we'll go ahead and get started. I'm not gonna record the work, but I'll just tell you that I'm gonna disconnect these two hoses here because those are the power steering hoses. And when you lift the engine, those hoses will just be hanging from the engine, from the power steering pump. Some people take off the power steering pump, but we'll see. Okay, so engine hour meter wire runs to the top of the coil. When that coil is hot, then the hour meter is running. The front starboard and that bolt right there pointing down right there in the middle, it is loose. On the other side, same thing, that nut in the middle is loose. So both engine mounts are loose. I'm also going to remove this engine or power steering pump and the alternator because I'm reusing them. The shop that I'm carrying this boat to, they're charging me to lift this engine out and drop another one in. I'm going to do all the connections, inshallah. I'll do all the connections that I'm doing the disconnecting, because all of this time, you know, would be time they would have to do. So it's less money for me to do all this work and then carry it to them. I have no access to anything that can lift in here and lift this out. Nothing's big enough. I could call the tow truck, but then I have to, the new engine, when it gets delivered, I'd have to get it off the truck, and I don't have a forklift to get it off a truck. So carry it to, have the engine delivered to that shop, let them take this one out, set the new one in. All right, for me and for you, this is my note. The ribbed one is for the alternator, and it's the shorter of the two belts. The long one is for the power steering pump. If you're wondering how to get them loose, the power steering pump, you have to use a wrench to reach in between the pulley and the pump itself to loosen this one, and then you use a ratchet on the back, and it allows it to move back and forth. On the alternator, you have to, there's a bolt on the bottom, and there's one in the middle underneath the power steering pump, and on top of the alternator. You have to put a socket on it, and I'm trying to see the nut that spins on the back. And then that nut right there, you have to hold this nut and the nut on the front in between, under the power steering pump and above the alternator. You have to turn that one. But it also holds the power steering pump in place. Well, the power steering bracket in place. The hose that comes from the thermostat housing down to the bottom of the exhaust manifold routes through this power steering pump. Well, I got the rolling. I removed the alternator and the power steering pump. I disconnect the power steering pump, then I hung it back there because I had to disconnect the power steering cooler. The power steering cooler has one line going to the pump, and one line going back to what I disconnected on the bank bulkhead. I just disconnected this hose here, the big water supply hose. I just disconnected it. That stays with the boat, but now the engine can be lifted out. Nothing else is connected now that power steering cooler is disconnected. The hoses going to the power steering cooler can stay because the power steering pump is here. When they pull the engine out, they can disconnect the power steering hose from that cooler and transfer the cooler to the new motor. I forgot, this part is pretty easy. I forgot to remove the outdrive, so I already took off the propeller because I'm gonna set it here. If you leave the propeller on and try to sit it on top, the propeller keep it from being even, sitting solidly. So I took the propeller off, disconnected the rams, and now I'm getting ready to take the nuts off so I can slide it back. And then should be ready for yanking that engine. I disconnect, everything on the inside is disconnected. Just got to pull this output shaft out with the outdrive, and it should be good to go. So I got the outdrive out and sitting on the sawhorses. That was okay. Got it taped up and then put a bungee to support it and a little ratchet strap through there, so when I'm driving It's held up, it's stopped, it's right there solid, so it won't bounce. It's up against the frame on that outdrive housing or whatever. But yeah, man, that wraps up everything. Started at 8:30, got done at 14:30. 08:30 to 14:30. That's set up and then clean up. I got everything cleaned up, straightened up.